Good morning. I agreed to do this presentation before I remembered that I'd be in California, and there's no way I'm getting up before 4 a.m. to talk to you guys. So this is pre-recorded. This is about difficult airways and the Bougie. The bottom line is use it every time, or at a minimum, have it tucked under the patient's shoulder, ready to use every time. The case is an elderly woman found by her family on the floor next to her bed, unresponsive and struggling to breathe. She arrives in the same condition, with the EMS bagging her and maintaining a decent sat. So I prepared to intubate her with the glide scope, gave her succinylcholine and Versed. Now, I may have gotten a little cocky as I haven't had a difficult intubation in about 5 years. I didn't have all my backup systems in place as I'd been taught. Needle insufflation, Crite kit, Bougie, direct blade. Once she was paralyzed, I took a look with the glide scope. I could see the esophagus really well, but where the vocal cords are supposed to be, it looked like a chunk of raw hamburger.
Track cables, 13,500 feet in length.
I took a poke where the vocal cord should have been, but the tube just slid down into the esophagus. I pulled out so we could try to reoxygenate. Respiratory can't get any air in because she's paralyzed and can't help, and they can't get anything past that obstruction. Her sats are falling. I have to dive back in, but it's the same story. Instead of plain hamburger, it's bloody hamburger, and I can't succeed. That's when a paramedic from the back row pipes up, "What about a Bougie?" And I go, "Of course." You know, in the middle of the scrum, I just didn't even think of it. So I pull out, respiratory tries to bag her again. No success. I go back in with the Bougie, and it immediately slides right in the middle of that hamburger, and there's that satisfying duh-duh-duh-duh as the coude tip runs over the tracheal rings, and I'm in. The endotracheal tube hesitates a little bit getting through whatever the heck is in there, but it gets in, we get her hooked up, and all the measures show that we're in the right place, and her sat comes spiking up. And we get her on the ventilator. The family arrived, and I got some background. This patient had esophageal cancer remotely treated, but over the last few weeks she'd had trouble swallowing and breathing, and her doctor had put her on steroids. That evening she'd had more trouble, took her steroids, went to bed, and family heard her struggling to breathe, and that's when they went in and found her on the floor. There is a great review of recent Bougie studies in MRAP, January 10th, about 9 minutes long. The main study looked at Bougie versus stylet in intubation using a MAC, either direct or some form of laryngoscope. And they were basically the same, 80 to 83%. Now, those were just all comers, multiple hospitals, so the people weren't particularly experienced in Bougie when they were randomized to that. But a separate study of experienced Bougie users had them at 98% first pass success. So whether you use it or not, you certainly want to have the Bougie nearby. I'm gonna go back to using it first time, every time. Interestingly, when this patient got to UVM, they scanned her and could see no mass present. They went in and looked, just saw inflammation, kept her on steroids, extubated her, and she did fine. She ended up going back to baseline physically and mentally, and as far as I know, has done very well. Cheers.